The graph of all things awesome. And it's a graph I use to help visualize and explain kind of what I consider to be the single most consistent challenge in us trying to go from here to there. There being, let's just call it an awesome place, or let's just say having an awesome goal. And a lot of us struggle, and a lot of people we get frustrated in our attempt to do this. And I think I have a graph that explains a lot of things. It's a meta graph. It explains why we feel frustrated sometimes, why sometimes that's not a bad thing, but it also shows some of the disconnect between our intended path to where we want to go and our actual one. So I'm going to just jump right in. I'm assuming you guys can see me. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to do this anyway. And I'm going to see if I can share this graph. So I'm hoping you see the graph. And here's the deal. So time goes from left to right. And hopefully you can, I don't know if you can see the words on the graph, but there's an A line or an effort value line going down and to the right. And there's a linear perception line or the B line going up and to the right. And then there's this blue line or the C line that's going up and to the right, but it's going right towards your great happy face goal. So hopefully you can see that. And then down at the left-hand corner, if you can see, it's a little red squiggly line highlighting the gap between where you are and this great goal line, the C line. So let me explain to you what this graph shows. And hopefully this will make sense. And as I go through this graph, as always, I ask you to overlay the conversation, overlay it to your own life, to your current situation, your current goals, your current intended places, your transformation projects, all of the above. This is an Uber graph. It should apply to most of those things. So the first is the effort value line. Well, let's start with the B line, the one that's right in the middle. I wish I could point to it, but you kind of see the one in the middle going up and to the right. That's how most people see their life. That's the path that most people are on. And it's a linear line, which means you do one thing and then it follows by the next thing and it follows the straight line and it's going up. But what you see in this graph is, although it's going up and to the right, it's not pointing at your happy face goal. And I'm going to explain to you why that is. It's near your happy face goal, and that's going to be the illusion. That's going to be the trap. But before we explain how to get to that happy face goal, you have to understand the significance of this A line, this one that's going down and to the right. I call it the effort and the value line, because for this graph, we assume that all things remain constant. So we take a snapshot of where you are, we hold those things constant, and then you draft out the future of that situation, and this is what it's going to look like. So the effort value line goes down over time because most things do. If you hold all things static, they will go. These two things will definitely go down. Your effort, your ability to give effort, they go down over time simply because you age over time. So your amount of energy that you can apply to anything over a long enough period of time will eventually go down. I know some of you high energetic 5 cups of coffee people saying you have energy to burn, but yeah, that's temporary. If you plot out your life, hopefully you have a nice, long, healthy life. Over time, the amount of energy you're going to apply towards anything is going to go down over time. So does your relative value, all things being held constant. So the value you're providing to your team, or the value, your capability, your ability to perform, your perceived and real value will also go down over time because things around you are constantly changing. And at some point, because of that effort value, the effort line going down, you will lose the amount of effort required for you to stay valuable over time. It's just how it is, right? So over time, your effort and the value, your relative value to whatever you are part of, will probably go down over time unless you do something to change that, you know. So here's what I want you to understand. I want you to look at the top right, your big happy face goal. That's where you're trying to go to get there. Most people think that somehow in the future of the line they're on, which is that linear perception B line, that line they're on, somehow they think that's going to get them there. In most cases, it won't. And because this graph is going to help me explain why I believe that to be true. So if you look at the start, if you start with the happy face goal and go backwards and go down, you see that blue line goes down to below where you are, and it creates that little difference gap. So here's the reality for those of you that are going to get this idea. The difference between where you are now and your happy face goal being accomplished almost always requires a fundamental change. A fundamental change in something that's pretty significant. So that can be a fundamental change in skill. It's quite often a requirement for a fundamental change in skill, but it could be a fundamental change in your habits. It could be a fundamental change in lifestyle. It could be a fundamental change in you fill in the blank. But in order for you to get to that great goal of ours we have, because I'm all in the same boat, the line to actually get there is that blue line, the C line. But the secret to the C line is it starts below where you are now because of this difference gap. So let me talk about that a little bit. I call the graph, I think, is really accurate in terms of a metaphor because it starts below where you are now, which means for you to get the skills that you do not have now, right? For you to acquire the skills you do not have now, but you need to have to get your goal, in the beginning, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to actually feel a little bit less capable than you might actually be at the moment. I like to use a sports metaphor to illustrate this point. So if you're a golfer or a martial artist or any type of athlete, and your coach comes to you and changes something pretty fundamental about how you play that sport, how you swing the golf club, how you stand in your fight stance. At the point of that initially of that change, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel less capable. You're going to quite actually be less capable, but only in that moment because it's new. Over time, it will become more comfortable. Over time, it will become more normal. Over time, you will become more capable. And as you continue to follow the line forward with that new skill set, that's the line that's going to take you. I'm actually pointing to the line on my screen. That actually takes you straight to your goal, right? So this, what I call this graph of greatness, or this graph of awesomeness, right? It also explains why many of us struggle to get to the goal. It's not because we can't do the work, it's because we're not willing to take that little difference gap. We're not willing to take the uncomfortableness, the challenge of that difference gap. We're not wanting to be vulnerable in that difference gap, right? In our professions, when we learn a new communication skill or new leadership style, or in the beginning, it's new, it's uncomfortable. We don't feel as proficient at it. We don't feel as good as we normally feel at it. We feel that we might become embarrassed or whatever that feeling is. So we're not likely to accept that gap. We resist it. And if we try it for a little while, we feel uncomfortable and we bail on it. So when we bail on that little difference gap at the bottom, we're literally bailing on the blue line, which means we're actually bailing on the most direct line to get to our goal. Hopefully this is making a little bit of sense to you. I would encourage you to plot this out. So I name these lines in ways that I think can help you remember the significance of the metaphor of the graph. The A line, the effort value line, remember effort and value, relative value goes down over time without an outside force changing things. Your skill set today, what that gives you X amount of value back from the marketplace, your job, whatever it is you do. If your skill set were to stay static over time, you would become less valuable over time. So that I call this the A line, one, because I wanted it to be ABC, but two, because that's your average line. That's when you average your current situation out over time, your effort and your value will go down over time. You have a downward trending average. There's nothing bad about you, it's just the reality of being human. The B line, or the linear perception line, this is the B line, but I also call it the B line because it's what we are being. It's who we are. By being who we are at this moment, we see things pretty linearly ahead of us. And we now see that, that line, although we might be able to make it go up and to the right if we're performers, it's not really going to get us to our stated goal, according to this graph of awesomeness, right? The way we get to this goal is that it's going to require some significant change. That significant change in the beginning is going to make us feel less than we are at the moment. But that's a good sign. That being uncomfortable is a sign that you're making a necessary change. But when you graph this out, you can feel better about accepting the change. You can feel better about sticking with the new workout program. You can feel better about learning how to keep your hands up. You can feel better about whatever, swinging the golf club a different way. You can feel better about reading X number of books on a consistent basis. You can feel better about getting a mentor. You can feel better about accepting positive feedback. You can feel better about all these things that will help you negotiate this difference gap. Because according to this graph of awesomeness, you got to create the difference gap to get on the blue line, and the blue line is the straight path towards your goal. So hopefully this is making some sense to you. I hope you take the time to write it out. Just draw an X, and remember the one that's going down and to the right, that's your effort and your relative value, all things being held constant. The B line, who you're being, that's a linear perception. You see what you're about to do next, and in your mind, you keep playing that forward, and you think that unless you clearly know how it's going to get you to where you want to go, it's probably just going to get you in the ballpark of where you want to go. But if you were to map backwards from the future mapping, from where you actually are trying to get, if you're honest with yourself, it's going to recreate some type of skill set gap, some type of gap, some gap in your situation. So the very first challenge question I'm going to have for you, and this will help you understand how clearly you understand where it is you're trying to go, is what are those, and skill set are so common, you can almost always know it's going to be a skill set adjustment requirement. So my question to you is, for you to get from where you are now to where it is you saying you want to go, whatever that means in your awesome plan, your plan of awesomeness, what's the skill set gap that you are dealing with right now? What's the skill set adjustment you are required to do, to make, to get on this blue line, right? And if you don't know what that skill set is, then you've probably not done this type of analysis, which means you're on that B line. You are thinking that you can just be who you are and continue to do what you do, and it's going to get you someplace other than the way you have gotten in the past. That's just a normal misconception, right? And most people will tell you that to get someplace you've never been, you're going to have to do something or become something you've never done, or become someone you've never been, right? So hopefully that made sense. Hopefully this graph shared across okay. Hopefully I'm actually live and on Facebook, because I have no idea, because I'm doing it inside of Zoom. And hopefully this made some sense for you, and hopefully you found some value. Hopefully, my biggest hope is that you do have some type of awesome plan, some plan of awesomeness. And now I'm challenging you to think about it in terms of this graph, and realize that being uncomfortable in the beginning, being uneasy in the beginning, being even less capable in the beginning might be the single biggest validation point that you can get, that giving you feedback that you are changing your path. You are changing the direction of your path. You are changing your direction. And the way we like to say that more poetically is, you're changing your destiny. When you change your destiny, that's probably, according to this graph, you should feel some of this stuff: uneasiness, less capable, less able, challenge.